Nerdrotic.com.
I guess you could look at this as a sequel to my last video, The Rise of Skywalker Cannot Be Saved by the Access Media, because the mainstream media has decided to chime in right on time, too late. And the Washington Street Journal, architect of one of the biggest adpocalypses here on YouTube, has decided to mention the Fandom Menace by all but name, and we will get into that. But speaking of the mainstream media, YouTube is currently cleansing the platform of old accounts and bot accounts, and usually there is collateral damage. I just lost hundreds of subscribers, so if you've come across this video, please make sure you are still subscribed. If you haven't done that, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking and sharing the videos. That is the only way independent content creators like yours truly and your favorite YouTuber can stay competitive against the Wall Street Journals, which are invading this platform. Now, we're not going to go over this entire article because it does make a very weak attempt to show both sides while still bringing the same old, year-old, tired arguments. And the headline says it all. Disney disturbs the Force. Pleasing Star Wars fans complicates saga. The fall of Skywalker looms as a total disaster. It says, the rise of Skywalker looms as a big hit. Can you loom as a big hit? And everyone loves Baby Yoda, except for RK Outpost. But there's also a disgruntled contingent of fans, a string of fired directors, and a decline in ticket sales. We're gonna hit pause. This is from Eric Schwartzel and R.T. Watson. Two people had to write this article. Luke Skywalker was coming back to the big screen, and executives at Walt Disney Company gathered to hear how. It was 2013, and Disney had months earlier paid $4 billion for Lucasfilm Limited, the production company behind the space opera of Princess Leia, Darth Vader, and the Power of the Force. And I have to agree with the writers of this article. Han Solo and Luke Skywalker are now meaningless, so why bring them up? From offices in Burbank, California, filmmakers began pitching Disney studio chief Alan Horn on the plot of Star Wars The Force Awakens, scheduled to hit theaters 2 years later. They introduced Mr. Horn to a character that would become a fan favorite, a creamsicle-colored droid called BB-8. Well, that's the first sign of trouble. You bring back the storied Star Wars franchise and you start out by bringing a half-ass R2-D2. He loved it, according to a person in the meeting, and loved the merchandise sales this soccer ball-sized creation could generate. And here's where Disney Star Wars made their very first Disney Star Wars mistake. But Mr. Horn had a note for the filmmakers. While Disney wanted to sell millions of toys, fans could never sense that any character or plot point was conceived as a business decision. He said Star Wars was different than any set of characters and storylines Disney had absorbed up until this point. Absorbed is a very good description of what the Disney Borg has done to some of our favorite franchises. Any whiff of marketing imperatives driving the creative decisions on the Star Wars franchise would immediately, in the eyes of devoted fans, cast Disney as the evil empire that had gobbled up their beloved modern-day myth. Again, this entire article is about how Disney did what it did to try to please the fans. But I would say that paragraph sabotages that narrative a little bit, and Disney cannot be happy that information got out. But I've got news for you, Disney. We knew that you were the evil corporation that gobbled up our favorite franchise, and we were totally okay with it. And guess what? We're also okay with you making lots of money because we were idiots. We thought you would honor George Lucas's legacy and not weaponize the access media and the mainstream media to attack fans and consistently lie to fans, breaking the fans' trust, building the foundation of Disney Star Wars on lies. Navigating that danger zone has proved to be the most difficult part of absorbing the blockbuster series, you think? How to bring aboard a new generation of moviegoers while avoiding turning off the diehard fans that have an outsized voice in the success or failure of these films. And that's the acknowledgement of what's going on here on YouTube. Disney thought they had everything they needed, the access media and the mainstream media, and they did, but they were not prepared for the modern era of answering to the fan directly, and they did not expect to spend so much time, money, and resources on trying to craft that narrative. Now, I understand why they reset what has gone on over the last couple of years, because these 75-year-old people who are reading the Wall Street Journal probably don't know that The Last Jedi collected 33% less than The Force Awakens, or the Solo spin-off film didn't do well because Rian Johnson and other repurposers at Lucasfilm were attacking fans, but the excuse from Disney Star Wars was the scheduling. Only after the purchase did Disney begin to fathom how avid a fan base it had on its hands, according to a consultant Disney hired. Yes, you heard that correctly. Disney had no idea how avid the Star Wars fan base was until after they purchased it. Disney thought Star Wars fans were the sure thing, an easy lay, but then they found out they were high maintenance, and not in the way that you got to buy them jewelry or an iPhone or a car. No, you got to take them out on multiple dates. They have to make us feel special. They have to meet our parents, and then and only then will they get luckier than any other franchise there is in existence. Now, the article went over Bob Iger talking about putting too much Star Wars out too soon, but considering Rise of Skywalker is about to come out in 2 weeks, we have Fallen Order and The Mandalorian. We all know that is complete BS. The rush has impaired the long-term planning for where the Skywalker Saga and other stories go from here, and you mean the Palpatine Saga. Rather than take the Marvel approach and begin filming the first movie with the end of the series in mind, again proving that they never had a plan, Lucasfilm has largely determined the overarching plot from movie to movie. Former employees say that creates a clash between the multiple moving parts of the Disney franchise machine depending on schedules, forward planning, and shared information. When a video game division at Disney approached the Lucasfilm Story Group about a game that would take place in between the time of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, video game developers were told the Story Group had no idea what was going to happen in The Last Jedi, even though Force Awakens was close to wrapping production, according to one of the former employees. Again, I would like to point out that the mainstream media is using unnamed inside sources. Lucasfilm executives had little idea how they would wrap up the trilogy in the film that followed, the one premiering this month, according to an executive who worked there at the time. Again, another unnamed inside source. Then the article goes over the focus on Disney Plus, The Mandalorian, a game show that's going to be hosted by Ahmed Best, and then they get into Kathleen Kennedy. Miss Kennedy? I thought it was Mrs. Kennedy. The Lucasfilm president, who was handpicked by Mr. Lucas to take over months before he sold to Disney, has struggled to bridge the pre- and post-Disney cultures at Lucasfilm, associates and former colleagues say. Unnamed sources. Mrs. Kennedy declined to comment. They go over Kathleen Kennedy's adventures at Lucasfilm, which have been well chronicled here on YouTube. Go watch the thousands of videos. And this is where we get into the fandom part, which is the most important part of this story. The story of the fandom Menace, the story of the backlash with Star Wars, the story of Disney Star Wars. The Last Jedi implied Rey, the central protagonist of the new movies, is not a descendant of a powerful Jedi or other storied lineage, as previous Star Wars heroes have been. It defied traditional Star Wars physics by turning hyperspace travel into a kamikaze trick capable of destroying an enemy's fleet. Worst of all, in the eyes of some fans, it killed off their hero, Luke Skywalker. But they actually ask a fan. Jay Wilson, a 45-year-old fan from Alt, Colorado, had trouble sleeping the night he saw it. He went back to the theater 3 more times. I couldn't let it go, he said, and that's exactly what Disney Star Wars wanted. I had to find something in the movie that was my Star Wars. He still bought a Blu-ray of the film when it was released and plans to see The Rise of Skywalker on opening night. I broke up with Star Wars after I saw The Last Jedi. Now, it still tries to text me in the middle of the night and send me threatening emails, but we are not getting back together, and it was because of the way you treated Han and Luke. It wasn't really because they died. It was the destruction of these characters, and the decisions behind the destruction of these characters were politically motivated. Star Wars is political in a sense that it has a foundation in historical politics, the rise of dictatorships, the death of democracies or republics. but it has never tried to take a stand on present-day issues, said Howard Rothman, a former executive in charge of franchise management at Lucasfilm who joined the company in 1980 and left about 2 years ago. Now, though, some viewers attribute contemporary motives to the content of the new films, he said, and he would be right because that's exactly what's going on, and that is a name source. Mr. Horn, the Disney studio chief, and Lucasfilm executives have sought to diversify the cast to meet contemporary audiences' expectations and also in a nod to the reality of a global marketplace where a majority of box office grosses come from overseas. And here it comes. Tell me if you haven't heard this one before, but I'm guessing the 75-year-olds who read the Wall Street Journal haven't. The bitter political fights dividing the U.S. have spilled over to the reactions to the movies, especially when it comes to some of their new movies' female characters. Kelly Marie Tran, a daughter of Vietnamese refugees who joined the franchise with The Last Jedi, said she left social media 6 months ago after the movie's release due to unrelenting racist and sexist harassment from Star Wars fans who didn't think she belonged in the films. I went over this in my last video. You could check it out there. You could check out the hundreds of other videos there are on this subject. I'll just ask you this question. Is it more likely that Kelly Marie Tran was really bullied off of Instagram by thousands of sexists and misogynists, or was it just a couple and it was used to exploit the situation? The storylines for both the current trilogy and the spin-off Rogue One and Solo, released in 2016, revolve around a heroine, generally an English brunette one, and have multiple central female characters, a big shift from the original movies in which Princess Leia was the only noteworthy female character. I'm all for equality, said Anthony Ergo, a 42-year-old fan from Liverpool, England, but it felt like it was the promotion of female characters but at the expense of male characters, because that's exactly what it was, Anthony, and nobody would have had a problem with anything if they hadn't have done that. That was a politically motivated decision. Why not just add female characters and not do it at the expense of male characters? You think things might have turned out different? But Disney didn't care, and they were willing to burn up some of their capital and goodwill to get what they call new, relevant fans. Lifelong Star Wars fan Brianna Sabalos is happy with the direction Disney has taken with the franchise she knew to love as a child. Watching the original movies with her father, I feel like as long as the message is good and it's relevant to the world today, it's probably a good thing to have. Mrs. Celebus, a 33-year-old resident of Irvine, California. Again, the word relevant. Star Wars is supposed to be timeless. Disney Star Wars wants you to watch The Force Awakens in 10 years. Unfortunately, due to its relevancy, it will be dated and people won't want to watch it as much. The reason Star Wars lasted as long as it has, like I've said before, it's timeless. Rey is going her own way and finding her own path. I want my daughter to feel like she can do anything, she said. And why can't she? Why does Rey have to tell your daughter what to do? Why don't you tell your daughter that? And why don't they tell a good story for Rey? Unfortunately, Rey isn't going to inspire your daughter. She might inspire her when she's 6, but when she's older, she's going to find out she's just a flat character with absolutely no substance. Social media amplified the fights. Vito Gasaldi from The Vito Show, a Los Angeles-based graphic designer, produced a YouTube video called Why Star Wars The Last Jedi is a Complete Cinematic Failure. By the way, if you're an up-and-coming YouTuber, that is a good title, straight and to the point, which dissects what he sees as narrative missteps in the film. It has nearly 8 million views, and Mr. Gasaldi said the ad revenue from the 20-minute diatribe the movie takes on one of the most beloved franchises of all time, throws it into a trunk of a car, and then backs it into a river, earned him enough to pay more than a year's rent. The mainstream media is not being very subtle in what they're trying to lay out there. They're trying to accuse Vito of making money off of the criticism of a film, which is exactly what he's doing. Although they're writing an article which requires you to sign up for a paid subscription to read. Why are they doing this? Because we are the mainstream media's primary competition, and they are losing badly, and they know it. So they're not going to miss an opportunity to go after a YouTuber. Unsolicited advice, and this is what I would do in this situation. Well, for one, I would not talk to the mainstream media or the access media, but if I were, I would not talk about how much I make. It's none of their business, and they would spin it like they did in this article. Disagreements about the politics of Last Jedi have grown so ugly that Russian trolls have identified Star Wars debates on social media as places to sow discord, akin to online discussions about Hillary Clinton or Black Lives Matter, according to a report published by Morton Bay, a research fellow at the University of Southern California. Of course, the article doesn't mention this has already been debunked, but I will ask, what's more likely? Russians are trying to hurt an American science fiction fantasy film, or a giant corporation is trying to spread misinformation to exploit a narrative? It cited instances in which Russian troll farms planted incendiary comments about Star Wars into online forums simply to rile people up. It helps spread the perception that America is divided and in chaos, he wrote. And I find it amusing that we're talking about a disinformation campaign within an article that I believe is a disinformation campaign. This disinformation campaign has made it hard for Lucasfilm executives and members of the story group charged with plotting the franchise's trajectory to understand fans' true concerns. No, it's called denial. They know that this is complete BS. They just want to cite it as an excuse. One former story group member said, I wonder which that one was. Did racism spurred by online trolls drive their rejection of Mrs. Tran's character? Or was it a broader issue of how her character's arc was developed in the film? What's the note behind the note? The person said. Often the person added, fan responses boil down to, don't change the thing I love. There is more of the lie. You can change the thing we love, just respect the thing we used to love. Others say that Star Wars films haven't been updated enough. The novel introducing the Last Jedi character Vice Admiral Holdo, because you had to read a novel because they didn't properly characterize her in the film. She was just Admiral Gender Studies and pretty much loathed by most of the fandom. Later played by Laura Dern in the film, suggested she was pansexual and interested in mates beyond humanoid males. What this has to do with the plot, I don't know, but maybe that's why they left it out. But the movie made no reference to the orientation, and some fans saw it as a missed opportunity to present a broader range of sexual orientation on screen. And I'm sure some fans thought that, but most fans didn't care. It doesn't have to be the main character, just somebody in the story, says Jeff Lasseter, a Chicagoan who attended Star Wars Celebration, an annual gathering of enthusiastic fans held in Chicago this year, in a Darth Vader helmet painted Pepto-Bismol pink, which he is absolutely free to do. Don't have a problem with it, but I do have a problem with what he says after this. People say, it's not my Star Wars, he said, describing some fans' complaints about the kinds of changes he is seeking. But he asked, why is it your Star Wars and not mine? Nobody has a problem with inclusivity and diversity as long as it's done organically and not at the expense of classic characters that we've all loved for decades. Disney has not done this. This is why people are saying it's not my Star Wars. It's not because of where you put your junk or a fictional character puts their junk. Nobody cares, and it really doesn't belong in Star Wars, straight or otherwise. And you know what, Jeff? It is your Star Wars. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I don't look for that in every movie I see. I don't need to see myself in every single character. I don't need to see myself in any character in a film. I just need to be entertained and not be beaten over the head with political agenda. The Rise of Skywalker is still expected to be a blockbuster, and those alienated by The Last Jedi have turned to Jar Jar Abrams with hope. Again, out of touch. One executive who has worked with Jar Jar Abrams said the director is keeping longtime fans in mind, saying it is like an invisible fan is whispering in his ear during story meetings. Oh, again, I will ask, what is more likely? Is Jar Jar Abrams keeping us, the fans, in mind, or is he going off and doing whatever the hell he wants? Kind of like he did with Star Trek when he created the Kelvin universe, because canon was a burden. Following the conclusion of the Skywalker trilogy this month, the Disney trilogy, Mr. Iger said he wants the next set of movies to be more accessible to common moviegoers, unburdened by decades of Star Wars memories. But he knows that will likely alienate some fans. You can't make everyone happy, he said. If you're not going to update it properly, he said, you might as well stick it in a museum and watch it get old. Bob Iger is an idiot, and I think it's pretty clear. I'm not even going to get angry at that statement because it's just the latest stupid thing he has said, and I am convinced at this point somebody else wrote his book. He is an empty suit. He is indeed that weatherman from New York, and he is essentially a Disney bot. He's Brick Tamlin, and I look forward to his presidential run. And while I look forward to the hundreds of videos that are going to be made about Bob Iger thinking that George Lucas's legacy was a burden, I think he just heard it in the hallway in passing, probably from Jar Jar Abrams, and he thought it was something important to say. While this article did make a halfway decent attempt to show both sides of the story, it still ultimately blames it on the fans, and it's no coincidence that this comes from the Washington Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is now a major shareholder in Disney since the sale of Fox. Disney Star Wars has learned a very expensive and valuable lesson. Do not cross the fandom and do not get caught lying to them, which they have so much in the last couple of years, I have lost count. And remember, the very cute Baby Yoda is the face of Disney Star Wars that is to this day weaponizing the access media and the mainstream media against fans, individuals. Disney Star Wars could have taken the high road. They could have been the healers during these divisive times. They could have provided escapism. Instead, they chose a side, alienated a large portion of the fan base that they will never get back.
Nerdrotic.com. Please subscribe.